Okay. Hispanic is a coined term, a term coined by the U.S. government for the 1970 census. Before the 1970 census, Hispanics were counted with whites for census sake. So in the 1970s, the government decided to create that other category because the Hispanic presence was really growing, and it was quite different from the white population, according to the government. So they were looking for a word that would describe these people that were not racially based. They are not black or white or even brown. They could be any of the above. And the closest they got to it was they share a common heritage and language that is Hispanic, and that's how the Hispanic term came to be. The term Latino is more of a self-given name. It happens, I would say, beginning with the 80s, and it is due to the immigrant population coming in from Latin America. And also, it got more concentrated on urban centers. More politically savvy Hispanics would rather call themselves Latino for this thing because it's a self-given name. It's not a name that was given by the US government. Example, this artist is a writer. She was granted the Hispanic award for literature. She refused to take it because she was a Latina writer. So there are issues of identity. Living in Washington, D.C., believe it or not, some of us sometimes look at the legislative channel and we hear all the debates. And I was watching a program on the Hispanic caucus. So these elected Hispanic officials, they had 45 minutes of deliberations about whatever, I don't remember the topic, it was maybe 3 years ago or so. And behind you would see the Hispanic caucus, huge sign. And I watched it like for half an hour or so. Different Hispanic elected officials, none of them used the word Hispanic once. So it is just, does that make sense? So that explains, how it is. And when using the Hispanic Latino is more inclusive because everybody gets included, including the Brazilians like the Latino much better. However, the Brazilians, out of their own choosing, decided to be with the pastoral care for migrants and refugees. They don't want to be a part of Hispanic affairs because they feel that they would be overwhelmed by the Hispanic presence. They feel that they get more attention being with the Asian, with the pastoral care of migrants and refugees. And that is, for Hispanics, Latinos, that is part of our own soul searching, our own struggle to self-identify. Because, the more you stay in this country, the more you learn to honor what people have as preference. For the Texans, the Mexican Americans, and people, in Arizona and California that didn't cross the border crossed them in the 19th century. For decades, they were invisible to the U.S. They were not even counted. So for them, the term Hispanic was a welcoming, wonderful welcoming reality because for the first time in the U.S. history, they were seen as a group. Before they were just anonymous. Does that make sense? So when you are working at the national level, when you are doing Hispanic ministry at the national level or even the parish level, and you are working with Hispanics other than Mexican, you need to become interculturally competent so you know how to relate to the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans and the Cubans. So that's my children, and then in the census 2000, we asked them to fill their own papers. Renata is 27, Daniela is 24, and Jonathan is 21. So they were much younger 14 years ago. And so we just have curiosity and actually self-determination, educating themselves, We asked them to self-identify. And the three children identified in three different ways. Renata, the oldest, is fair, with blue-green eyes, and she was Caucasian. Daniela, she's fairly fair, but is not as fair as Renata. She was a Mexican American, And Jonathan, the baby, was a Mexican. Now, when they filled up the 2010 census, they had 3 different answers for themselves. Renata was a Latina. So, and this is what is beautiful about the ministry and about intercultural competency, is that we evolve. Everything is developmental. And as we will see, when we get into the exercises and into the analysis, it's important to realize where you are at. What is your level of comfort in relating to people from other cultures? And where you might be in that continuum that we will get after the activity, because it's very good to self-identify where you are, to make a diagnosis of your own intercultural competency possibilities, where you might need to improve, and so forth and so on. So we are all on a path of becoming hopefully more interculturally competent. And what we see above water is only the tip of the iceberg. We're all familiar with that. And on the iceberg is what we see, smell, sense, through the senses on a particular culture. It is what is almost obvious because it comes to the senses. What are some of the things that would be here? So what someone looks like, the language they speak, how they made the sign of the cross, yeah. Their food, excellent. What else? Their customs. The way they dress. The way they dress, yes. Their story through speaking, but then it's a little, then you are beginning to get into the bottom of it. At what time they arrive at places. When they are celebrating, how do they celebrate? How do they go about picking up after a meeting is done? Everything that we can observe on other people, the way they do things, is all at the tip of the iceberg. And that's good for us to notice, to realize. But for us to be able to understand, why do they do that? Why do they behave in such a way? We need to go a little deeper. What are the values, attitudes, beliefs, assumptions, concepts, perceptions, thought patterns? What makes them tick? Why is it that they do what they do? And discovering that is when you are beginning to enter into the world of the deeper sense of a person and of a particular culture. And I'll give you a couple of examples, and maybe I'll invite some of you to share some. For instance, the use of time. There are at least 2 ways of looking at it. One of it is chronos, and the other one is kairos. Chronos being that time is measured by an outside object that tells you what time it is. And European American cultures in US culture context are very chronos oriented. Time is measured. And time tells you where you should be and how you should be throughout the day. And that is a high value on a European American culture. And those of us who have absorbed that, share to that degree on that value. Latinos, Hispanics, Asian Pacific Islanders, to a good degree Native Americans, they have a sense of time as kairos. And kairos is that time happens as you move from one event to the next. So what tells you where you should be is if you are done doing what you're doing. So you can begin to do the next thing, and then the next thing. And there is something beautiful about having a sense of kairos, because you are really present to what you're doing. And you give more flexibility to relationships, to what might be happening. Why am I 15 minutes late for Mass? Is because I had a lot of events that I need to take care of before the event of going to Mass. And that's how it is measured. And I think that there is a great value on having more of a kairos sense of time, because it gives you the ability to be present in a particular way. But it's also very good to have a chronos sense of time. So ultimately, if you're interculturally competent, you need to be able to play with both. And you need to be able to allow for both. So your sense of tolerance of ambiguity and doing things differently allows you to be supportive and to be understanding, and at the same time to be in a position to enrich and learn. Because we are all on a learning process. I can tell you with my wife and I, we have been married for 28 years, and it's been a wonderful intercultural experience. and what happens is that we complement one another a lot. And I'll tell you another value about our home. For Mexico, for my family, even within the Mexican culture, you do everything for your kids, and you want to make things for your kids sometimes as easy as possible, as pleasant as possible, and so forth and so on. So for me, when the kids were getting older and they wanted to have a car, the use of a car, I had no issue on telling Renata, here are the keys. It's your car, use it. Because we had an extra car. And Mary said, I don't think so. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, that's not her car, that is our car. Yeah, but she's our daughter, and you can use the car, so it's her car. Well, anyway, to make the long story short, it was challenging for me at the beginning, but then I saw the value of it. Renata will have her car when she buys her car, and she pays the insurance for her car. So the sense of, from my wife Mary, for Renata to really have her own car through her own means was a high value. That's something that she really wanted to not only expect from Renata, but instill in Renata. My high value was, I want to please my daughter, and I want my daughter to be happy. So if having the sense that is her car is what makes her happy, why not? So, and to have the conversation about these two was very interesting, because there is a little truth in both. But anyway, so that is just another example. So as you are looking at these underlying values in this example that I gave you, for me a very high value also is a sense of protectiveness. And maybe as a father it's even more emphasized than as a mother, because there are some gender realities there. For also the sense of the family protects the individual. So the family and all that belongs to the family is for the person. Well, yes, but you need to be able to build your own person so that you'll be in a position to build your own family. So all these values, were at play just about that particular relationship. When you are putting together choirs on a bilingual mass, and you have the values of the English-speaking choir, and then the values and possibilities of the Spanish-speaking choir, you are dealing with all kinds of assumptions here. How am I going to have a conversation? What kind of music are we going to select? How are we going to be sitting together? All of those values are at play, and will have something to do with the way for us arriving, if the bilingual, bicultural choir is going to be a witness of unity, or is going to be a sign of how complicated it is to do this thing. It all depends on how they are able to breach those values and those, so that their behavior will be inspiring, their music will be joyful, and people will say, oh my good Lord, that is a well put together choir. Now, within this theory of culture, we have generalizations that are just that, to be helpful, not to be stereotypical, that actually identify cultures as having certain values. One is the collectivist and the other one is the individualist. And I already mentioned some of them in this example, some of the contrasting differences. But I'll give you some more. This is for your reference. But for instance, when Latinos come together, since this is more of a European American Anglo-Latino group, a very high value is to mingle first, just to have a chance to visit, to have some sweet bread and hot chocolate. That is part of the ritual of coming together. Not as high values to have a written agenda or to have time for each one of the items. It is not necessary to have a certain decision-making process in place, but it's more to have a conversation and so forth and so on. Is more of a collectivist approach. On the individualist approach, there is a lot more emphasis on the tasks than on the relationship. In the Latino context, if I am at this table and we're arguing about something, the highest value for me is that when I get out of this table, they will all still be my friends. And I am willing to compromise, and I'm willing to negotiate many things so that the good of the group and the relationships are in good shape. When you have a European American group, the relationship is not what is at play, it's the task. We're here, we have this agenda, we have an hour and a half to fulfill it. We're going to fight, perhaps, but that's fine. In individualistic cultures, there is a value that I really like as a Latino. You agree to disagree. And you can have a good fight, and you get out of the meeting, and everything is fine. In the Latino context, when you are disagreeing with someone, it might be interpreted as you don't care about a relationship. You're more concerned about the stupid meeting than about our relationship or friendship. And so you begin to see that the way a group makes decisions and organizes meetings has a lot to do with what is at stake at a deeper level, what is at play. So when you try to have Hispanics and European Americans coming together for a parish council meeting, your best shot is to have a meeting that allows for the highest values of both groups to be at play. That you have a little mingling. That you have something that engages the relationships as opposed to only having, a very tasky way of approaching the meeting. Any comments on this? Does this sound familiar? Any comments on this? Uh-huh. I would say that within Latino culture, the authority is based on the relationships and the recognition of the leader. Who is the leader? And the leader tends to be older, tends to be louder, tends to expect the group to listen to him or her and to follow suit. That is, I would say, the basic tendency. It could happen within the household, it could happen in the parish, it could happen anywhere. That is why, and I can say this because I am a Latino. I'm not speaking for all the Latinos, but at least, my experience is that for us it's very difficult to experience two leaders at the same table. Because oftentimes they will be perceived as in competition. Does that sound familiar, Latinos? Yes. So, and that is part of how leadership plays out. But remember that culture is not static, it's in constant movement. And we can learn. So something that I constantly teach Latino leaders, Hispanic Latino leaders in parish, is to develop the ability to understand leadership as a shared leadership. It is the group that has the leadership, not the person. But this is very interesting. Well, how come is it that the Latinos being the collectivist end up being the individualist? Because the individual is identified as the leader because he's the one that is able to hold the community together. Make sense? Is the responsibility of that leader to hold us together, as opposed to is the responsibility of this body to hold us together. So it is for the sake of the community. And when it comes to crisis in Latino leadership is who is going to better be able to take care of the community. And the transition there is us together. That is the growing edge for us. In terms of the more individualistic, what will be the growing edge of the more individualist way of making decisions, for instance? Before we're going to do another exercise in the afternoon, but I want to share with you this is one of the best practices that has been very helpful for us understanding the developmental aspect of intercultural competency. This is a work done by Milton Bennett, and it is in your book. It is one of the appendixes in your book. And actually, this book uses the example that I'm going to be sharing with you just now to illustrate the stages of development. So Milton Bennett says that we go not only as individuals, but as entire communities, organizations, through 6 basic stages of intercultural sensitivity. And we always start at some point. So this might give you an opportunity to see, where is your parish? Where are you in terms of Milton Bennett's work? The denial has to do with just, sometimes out of sight, out of mind. Let's take the example, this parish. And you have the director for Hispanic ministry coming to visit the pastor and said, Father, do you have Hispanic ministry in your parish? He's a new director, of course. And the pastor says, we don't have Hispanics in the parish. Maybe we have 2 or 3, but they've been here for a long time. I baptize their kids. They are there to college. And then the director, who did her homework, said, well, Father, just by looking at the census, I noticed that within the boundaries of your parish, you have 600 Catholic families, the Hispanic families. And data shows that at least 65% of those families will be Catholic. Really? Yes, Father. Yes. So this is, there, the denial of the pastor was based on him just not having a clue that there were so many Hispanics living there. Well, let's follow the example of the pastor brings to the attention of the parish council the news he just discovered. And the parish council said, really? No. And they are incredulous because they just didn't know that. But I guess, that's what the census is showing. Look, Mrs. Gonzalez gave me the info. This is the picture of our parish. And our parish is a territory. And here is one of the most important realizations. As we were unfolding BICM, even during the piloting session, we were very surprised to realize that one of the most important discoveries of this presentation, including priests, was that the parish is a territory. Not that the priests didn't know. It's a territory. If we are talking in Catholic terms, the Catholic understanding of the parish is a territory. That's according to canon law. But it's also a faith community that is gathered. But when a pastor is assigned to a parish by the bishop, he is there as an extension of the episcopal ministry of the bishop, responsible for all the souls that live within the boundaries of that parish. Am I right, fathers? That is a responsibility. However, and the book says it, that because of who we have been in the United States, the way the church has evolved in the United States as the Catholic Church, we have learned to be church sometimes as congregationalists. So we don't sometimes practice within the context of the parish in a Catholic sense, but we act as congregations, meaning the parish is a group of faithful who voluntarily, willingly come together with other Catholics for fellowship and for worship, which is the technical definition of a Protestant congregation. So, and it was very interesting for us as trainers to realize that diocesan staff, parish staff, think of the parish as a congregation. They don't think the parish as a territory and do not necessarily grasp the huge responsibility of the priest, that is the pastor, there. So, and we are going to go deeper into it, because this understanding in any way means, and the bishop said in the document, this does not mean at all that having Catholics living in one territory, but becoming members of another parish that is not in the territory where they live in, this practice, which is widely extended, is perfectly acceptable. This is just the way parish life is, and there is nothing wrong about it. It's perfectly fine. However, that does not preclude the pastor from being responsible for every soul living within the boundaries of his parish. Does that make sense? So in a way, the Catholic Church in the United States has the benefit of the environment in which it grew, which has proven to be a very good value, but also has the responsibility and the grace of being there for every single soul that lives in this country. That is very uniquely Catholic, and I think it's a gift. And that's where this pastor will tell the council members, it is territory, but Father, okay, we understand that territory thing, but we don't know who these people are. We don't know who they are. So the mode is people begin to move from a denial into a defensive position. We don't know who they are. Maybe they are just passing by. Maybe they are illegals. Maybe, what may happen if we invite them to come? They might take over. So it sounds familiar. So you're beginning to see a very human, natural response of trying to defend what you have, what you know. And by the way, I'll tell you a secret. For all of those who have Hispanics, for the registration thing, don't worry about it anymore. Because it is as simple as this. You come here and you want your child baptized. What's your name?
Mine?
Yeah. Where do you live? How many more children do you have? Oh, that's good. How long have you been here? I have a very cordial conversation with this person. I'm registering him in the parish. Because what he understands by registering is that you are welcoming me, that you are acknowledging my desire to have my child baptized. It's perfectly fine just to take the information and they belong. Does that make sense? But when we make that registration process the key about whether you belong with Christ or not, that is when the conflict begins. That's when the problem begins. Does that make sense? So this has been done all over the United States. Just a simple thing. Leave behind your registration concept. Engage the person. And engage the person. Get to know the person. That is new evangelization. Don't doing things the same as usual, but just making that personal connection. Not even getting to the issues. That's something very striking about Pope Francis. Don't talk about issues. Talk about people. Engage the person. So, but anyway, at this point, there is quite defensiveness here. And is there justifiable reason that they are being defensive? I think so. Does the pastor need to hear to those voices? Absolutely yes. He needs to acknowledge that those feelings are there, those feels are there. If the feelings are there, the fears are there. If the pastor does not acknowledge those fears, he's going to have to deal with them later on. Because they are real. And it's good for the pastor to see that. We'll see later on how important it is that for reconciliation. The third level. Okay, Father, they're here. And you know what? They are baptized Catholics. It's a homecoming. We know. Okay. But you know what? We are all people. We're all the same. If they want to come, they can come. The door is wide open. So the minimizing. So you minimize the differences so you don't have to do anything different to welcome them. This is a good example is the expression colorblind. Oh, we are all people. And what black people will love for us to tell them is that you're black. But we don't want, because we want to minimize the differences to keep the status quo. So in that regard, the color blindness is in Washington not politically correct because you are not recognizing people for who they are. So that's an important reality. So the minimizing has the goal of yes, acknowledging the presence, but letting that community that is coming in, or that has been there all along but not served, to do all the work. If they want to show up, they can show up. We have 5 masses to choose from. So, not a big deal. Now, the 4th level has to do with acceptance. Okay, Father. They're here. They are ours. They're people, and the differences are very significant. Because we have been waiting for a year and a half, and none of them have shown up. And so we might need to do something different. So the acceptance is not only about the presence of these folks among them, but the responsibility the church has with them, acknowledging that people are different and therefore they might need different responses. And they are struggling with that in the acceptance. They are not only accepting the presence of the other, but they are accepting their own reality as maybe having to move from where they have been. Now, it comes the 5th step, the adaptation. They're here, they're ours, significant differences, we need to accept them for who they are, we need to do things different. And that's what happens in the case of Hispanic ministry. What is the sign per excellence that Hispanics have been welcomed as a community in a parish? Spanish. There you go. There you go. The Sunday liturgy in Spanish is established, making it very clear that that parish, St. Joseph's, welcomes Hispanics not only as individuals that willingly come in, but as an entire community of the baptized into the fold of the parish in a homecoming spirit. And the way we define a parish with Hispanic ministry at the Bishops' Conference is when the Sunday liturgy is offered in Spanish, because from that the other ministries flow. Now, that is just, I think, is the most significant, and then everything kind of grows around that. At this point, there is adaptation not only in terms of the schedule of the masses, but the use of the parking lot, the use of resources in the parish begin to be a little different. And we'll see later on this afternoon how this is done in concrete terms. And this will be very important for the pastors, for instance, and for the principals. The key here is that we are thinking ecclesially. If the parish decided to establish the Sunday liturgy in Spanish, whose decision was it? No, but well, the pastor is the only one that can make that decision. So, and in that regard, it's an ecclesial choice. It's an ecclesial decision. It's something that cannot be done by anybody. The pastor, whether collegially or kind of kicking and screaming, might bring a parish to that reality. And so in that sense, it is an ecclesial choice. It is the church choosing to do this. And sometimes it's done through a process that is healthier than in other times. The pastor is the key. We will see before lunch a little bit, and especially after lunch, how the movement of ecclesial integration, the process of ecclesial integration, depends to a great deal in the pastor. Because the pastor is not only the sign of unity in the parish sacramentally, as in persona Christi, but as a human being. This book is based on the experiences of 20 pastors of shared parishes that had been able to build a very strong sense of the one parish with the diverse communities. And they, by consensus, said that it's very difficult to see this developmental process moving if the pastor is not on board. And of course, that everybody, this is for pastors and their teams. People in the parish council, people in the staff would have to make adjustments in terms of generating that positive response to the new community, from the receptionist to the person that is doing religious education and so forth and so on. And some people might have more of a struggle than others, because the pastor has the benefit and the grace of his ministry, of his ordination, and of his mission. He is responsible for all. That's what he signed up for. wasn't thinking about that particular community or communities, but that's what he's there for. But a youth minister that went to Steubenville or to Loyola and got trained on catechism and youth ministry, and then all of a sudden the pastor is asking me to work with people I don't even know. There's a good degree of unfairness about that. And it needs to be done in such a way that gives me the chance to be successful at my job. Another principle that I'm sharing with you, the first one was you plan with people, not for people. Second huge principle, you have to do it yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. And this is very good. You have to do it yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. For instance, if the pastor is the one that makes the decision, we need Sunday liturgy in Spanish here, but I don't know Spanish. So I'm going to get the help that I need to be able to provide that sacramental ministry to that segment of my parish. The DRE. Well, now I need to do with catechesis and with parents of children, and how am I going to do this? Do you have to do it as a DRE? Yes. Do you have to do it alone? No. How are you going to work with the parents of the Hispanic community to develop a catechetical model that would be relevant for them? Does that make sense? So, but it's true. Not everybody is on the same page. Not everybody starts on the same page. But what the Holy Spirit does is it guides the pastor and his team to respond in a way that is relevant, that is life-giving, that is, in accordance with the work of evangelization, which is to bring the good news of Christ to every human situation. It's not to make so that everyone fits on my situation. So this is work of evangelism. You need catechesis, and you are going to see later on that ultimately what this work of intercultural competency is about is conversion. Is a profound experience process of conversion. Without the conversion, struggle is there. Yeah? Just let me finish by saying that when you reach the integration process level of sensitivity stage is when the staff in the parish as a whole is interculturally competent and can work with the different communities and accommodate for both or the three. In my case, we have the 4 communities, and there is a Bengali community coming in now, actually. And the staff is trilingual. And we have, I don't think there is one person on the staff that is not at least bilingual. We have a school. It's called the St. Francis International School. When you have a global class or you have a classroom that might have people from 9, 10 different nations just among the students. So it's any class on social concerns of geography just becomes a lot of fun because you have the representation. That we have 54 nationalities represented in 450 students school. And St. Camilo's has been able to reach a high degree of ecclesial integration. And according to the intercultural sensitivity of Milton Bennett, it would be here. They have gone pretty far. We just hired a couple of years ago a new overall director for religious education, and I was part of the interviewing committee. So there were representatives from the Hispanic, the English-speaking, the French-speaking, and the African-American community interviewing the DRE because we needed a person that could show the skills and the desire to work with everyone. And here, as we will see in the afternoon, a key to achieving this is access to the decision-making process. But I'm getting a little ahead. For schools, because I haven't used any examples with Catholic schools. Catholic schools is a new horizon in Hispanic ministry. For many decades, we were so concerned with the parish that the Catholic schools was not really something that we looked at. Even as director for Hispanic ministry, we wouldn't go there because it was prohibitive, it was not appealing, it was a different animal and so forth and so on. That has changed. And has changed in a very mysterious way and in a very obvious way all over the country. in more places more than in others, for two realities. One, Catholic schools are disappearing. We don't have enough students. We have too many empty chairs. That's one. The other one, we have an unlimited amount of young Catholics who could benefit from Catholic schools. So that is a reality we have. And the University of Notre Dame launched an initiative on bringing together the Catholic schools reality we live today and the Hispanic and other communities that have not been a part of Catholic education. And the initiative is going quite well, and it has generated a number of best practices. And I understand that you have working someone with Catholic schools. How many principals do we have here? I'm so glad you're here. And just to give a couple of examples, this is something that is evolving and is moving very rapidly, and it also has the benefits of grants because the Catholic community overall and the foundations are concerned about this. In Richmond, Virginia, in the Diocese of Richmond, you have a success story that is just unbelievable. They have been able to bring Hispanic Catholic families into the Catholic school experience in a wonderful way, very interculturally competent way, and the schools are changed, just as parishes change the way they relate and perceive and welcome families and children of Hispanic descent and others, not only Hispanics. Schools are doing that too, because you need to, and it needs to begin with who? Begin with who? With the principal. If the principal is on board, then you have something that you can work on. Otherwise, you need to work on the principal. and another, just anecdotal, but is becoming more and more present. I was visiting with my daughter in Idaho, where she's a nurse, and I was helping her facilitating a meeting while in town. And I overheard a conversation during the break. And this conversation was of a principal who was talking with another person. And the other person was asking her, Marian White, about her school. And I overheard that in 7 years, that school had moved from a 3% minority to a 34% minority present, most of them Latinos. So, at the end of that session, say, can I have a few words with you? And she said, sure. So I asked her about her experience, and just 5 minutes she told me some details. And then I asked her, and how were you able to do this? How was this possible? What changed that this is now in place? And she simply said, I changed. That's what happened. I stopped seeing Hispanics as the children belonging to another reality, to other families, to other communities, and I made them my own. I simply began to expect them to be here, and I just need to make sure that I would be ready to welcome them. So it goes, again to this is a conversion, but it is a win-win situation. It is a great opportunity that we have today. How can we bridge between the well-established community and the new immigrant community so that we can build together the church of the future in parishes and in schools?